You're live.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to California Free Radio. I'm Mike Netter. We've been called Outrage. We've been called Rebuild California Town Hall. But basically, let's get real. California's turned into an expletive-deleted hole here, and that's why we're fighting for California. Everybody out there, we're streaming live on X or Twitter, as we still call it, at Netter Mike. We're streaming live on my LinkedIn page, Mike Netter, and on Facebook, where in a couple minutes we'll be live. We're live right now on my page on our Rebuild California Facebook groups. Normally, it's me, Kurt English, who you can tell is a Dodger fan. Boo! I'm going to say that even for the LA people because I am a Padre fan and our postures got not so subtly whipped here, but we did go 5 games. But rather than turn to a sports report, Scott Peotter, who's running for state assembly in the 73rd, is normally on, but he's at a political event tonight. Now, for everyone out there, this is really your show. If you saw earlier, you can make comments on the stream. We collect them through Restream. Our producer, Dan, will tell us what you're saying, good, bad, or indifferent, or you can log on the actual webinar and we might even put you on the air. The difference between this and KABC radio that we did before is we could say pretty much anything we want. We're not regulated by the FCC. And while we'll be back on KABC when we feel like it, quite candidly, I think there's something to be said for bringing the show to the people. And we've always vodcast this, but we're continually looking for ways to expand our reach. Because in case you haven't heard, Kurt, have you heard? There's an election coming up.
On November 5th, but Mike, ballots were mailed last week on October 7th. I've got my ballot. My wife's got her ballot. Family members and friends have the ballot. And we ought to have a conversation about what you, the listener, can do to vote early and benefit the conservative cause. If you vote early,
do that. I'm going to let you do that right now while I share to a bunch of Facebook groups, including Rebuild California Public Group, where you can always help us by sharing to various groups here.
And if you go to Mike's X or Twitter feed at Netter Mike, you can sign up Netter News.
I was just going to say that. Kurt, you're getting smarter.
Mike.
Why am I hearing an echo of myself? Oh, I know why I'm hearing an echo. Now you're not hearing an echo. Oh, you are. Right. Kurt, talk.
All right. So you can do something to benefit every. I'm echoing too. Mike's talking. Anyway,
echo was gone. Dan, are you on the? That's very strange.
Yeah, we're all echo.
I don't hear any echo, guys. It's fine.
Okay.
We hear it. So if you vote early, if you have a party or social gathering with friends, your church group, your Bible study, the kids, parents from your flag football league, whatever you're doing, have an event, go over the ballots. There's a number of voter guides, and I'm sure Mike's got those voter guides on his Twitter feed. If you go to Scott Peotter's website, taxfighter.com, you can see the voter guides. You can also donate to Scott's important assembly campaign. There are 80 seats in the assembly. All 80 of them are up for grabs this year. If you don't like what's going on in California, if you don't like the bill that Newsom signed, that Petrie Norris in Irvine and other Democrats voted for to prevent teachers and people at school from telling parents that a kid wants to wear a dress when he goes to school if his name's Johnny. If you don't want tampons in boys' bathrooms, if you don't want our gas prices to rocket up with new Democrat taxes and fees, if you're completely dissatisfied with the crime situation where people are going into South Coast Plaza in Costa Mesa and Fashion Island and Newport Beach and brandishing weapons and robbing people. And in one case, some robbers, to get away, ran over a tourist and killed her. If you're not happy with the direction of California, you can change it. But here's how you have to. You have to vote. You have to get all your friends and family to vote. You need to go to taxfighter.com and look at all the judges, the school board members, the city council members, and vote up and down the ballot. Mike Nenner made such a great point the last few weeks about people voting for the top of the ticket, in this case for president, and then not finishing the ballot because they may not know how to vote on the judges, the school board members, the city council members. But those people implement policy that help you. Tonight, Scott Peotter is at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, for a candidate forum. That church and its members got fed up with their local school board. They had members run and they took over the school board. They're currently suing the state of California to prevent these ridiculous transgender mandates. So people can have an impact.
Right. And I think it's important to note, too, that in addition to voting on 100% of the ballot, and we have up on Rebuild California under the voting tab a couple things that I really want to drive home. And if I have a tweet or post pinned at the top of my feed that I encourage everybody to read, it's a little bit lengthy, and send out. There's two really important things under the voting tab under Rebuild California. One is we have a voter guide for Los Angeles County that's going to talk about the propositions. And Kurt, I'm going to get back to that in 1 second. But there's also a really important tool from Ballotpedia. Much is talked about cheating, inequities, etc., that go on in elections. And whether it's inept or evil, there's a lot of bad things that take place in election. Here's something really important, even when it comes to voting for Scott Peotter or your local school board. You have to make sure that you get the right ballot. And Dan, our producer, who was with me during the recall, and the rest of our crew, the reality is we spent a lot of time on the radio show talking about the ballots and what they look like. This is about 3 years ago, and I was rather surprised, and I shouldn't have been because I didn't know this myself, as to what's involved in a ballot and what should be on it. And really the reality is of what President Trump did is he made us aware of a lot of things. Don't get confused, Kurt and audience out there, by the shiny object, which is the presidential race a lot of the time, and the ballot boxes and the drop boxes. And we have a side of Rebuild California that does a lot of election analysis. And here's part of the problem. And for those of you that are older or not even that old watching this, I want to take you to a flashback. Remember flashbacks, Kurt?
Flashback Saturday. Yeah, flashbacks on KROQ in the 80s in Los Angeles.
Let's talk about an election flashback. It wasn't that long ago, as little as 2 or 3 elections ago, about 4, where when you wanted to vote, you went to the local garage or the local school where you were supposed to vote. And we've had some changes at the national and state level under the Voters' Choice Act, where supposedly to make it more accessible, one, we're going to mail in ballots, but put that down.
Well, hold on, Mike. We don't want our listeners to mail in their ballots. Either take it to the Register of Voters, a voting center, or the box.
But before you even do that, here's a very important point I want to make. When it comes to state assembly, Kurt, yes, take your ballot in. Take the ballot that you get in the mail, take it in. I turn my ballot in the ballot center. There's nothing wrong with voting ahead of time at one of the centers. Don't drop it off. Don't mail it in. But Kurt, I want to give you step 1 that's very important. That's to check to make sure you get the right ballot. What? The problem when I talked about downstream elections is everybody knows the presidential election should be on there, right? And they're familiar with the U.S. Senator election in California that should be on there. But when you get down to city council, state assembly, many of the ballots are assigned wrong. Because today you can even go to another county in California, turn in your ballot, and they will send it to you. So we have a tool put out by Ballotpedia that's under our voting tab on Rebuild California. Ballotpedia nationwide. So if you're in Tennessee, Florida, my friend Greg that called in from Wisconsin a few weeks ago, right? You put in your address and it will show you what should be on your ballot. We've caught the Board of Registers. Again, who cares if it's inept or evil? It still happens. We're city council districts. And I want to drive to that because the Democrats make a really good play on that. You get the wrong school board ballot. You don't realize that the school board portion for your district isn't on there. You don't realize that the city of XYZ, you don't have the proper district on there. And that's a lot of the time how, when you look at election results, when you have evenly divided districts like the state assemblies, whether it's homicide or whether it's manslaughter, incidental or intentional, it still happens. We get ballots that don't have the right candidate on there, and you have to check for that. We're supplying you with a tool for that. Kurt, you know that Scott has something great going for him running for the assembly just due to the fact he served as a city council person before, right?
Yes, because he can have a ballot designation that indicates that. But there's another important point you make, that not only do you want to vote, you want to vote early. Why is it important to vote early when we have ballot harvesting in California? Very important point. Because the conservative groups, the pro-family groups that are chasing ballots to see who's voted, if you vote early, they don't have to spend any money getting your vote in. They can focus the money on people who haven't voted yet. Why is that important? You're making their money go farther.
But I want to go back to the ballot itself and really drive this point home. Because in California, especially, there's been a big industry, Kurt, for like the last 10 years of lawyers suing at-large cities. At-large cities who say, look, we're going to take the top three, bring them to city council, have an at-large mayor so everybody gets to vote. They have now broken the city, almost all the cities, Glendale,
Costa Mesa,
Redding,
in Scott's
Costa
district.
Mesa, they've broken them into districts, right? So people see a ballot and they're not in the politics like we are, and they don't know that they have the correct city council, water board, or school board person on there. The Democrats know that, and it's the Democrat-driven lawyers, that the liberal-driven lawyers, I should probably say, that are threatening these cities with huge fines to break up into smaller elections. So before you even drop off your ballot and vote early, go to this tool to make sure, which drills down to a pretty finite level, that your ballot is correct. I'm going to give you an example we caught last election.
How common is this? This is the first time.
It's more common than you think. I'm going to give you an example right now. City of Claremont nearby, a gentleman running for city council, and I really want to drive this home. He was running for city council, and you win the city council in the city of Claremont, California, with about 12 or 1,400 votes. We found 1,100 ballots after the election because he noticed that his number of votes didn't make any sense, yet his competition, right, had gotten one district over, had a lot more votes. We did an analysis of it that was sent out, and we found the precincts were marked wrong. It's a lot more common than you think it is. Okay. And it really may not matter, for example, again, at the statewide elections or even for some of the state assembly elections. But if a couple thousand people get the wrong ballot in a state assembly election that don't get the opportunity, for example, to vote for Scott, it's more common than you think. It's a lot more common than you think. And what the challenge is when you get down to these local offices that used to be at large in these finite districts of 3,000, 4,000 votes, they're wrong. And they're wrong because we have all the shifting. Kurt, have you ever looked in depth in a real election file, for example? You may or may not have, but I want to drive this home. Okay. You used to have one precinct that was assigned to you, what we call precinct walking,
Yes.
etc.
Yes.
Today, in the CAGOP files and the other ones, each person has about 6 different precinct numbers assigned to them, a master precinct and sub precincts afterwards that are by your address. Those sub precincts, because we basically asked clerks at the board of registers who aren't real good at this to make sure that micro target your house, you see what I mean, for a small city that you live in, to make sure that your 1,200 ballots are correct. And there are more errors than you think there are. And not just this election, actually how they kind of, so a Democrat wins. And my point is, starts to say, well, hey, I've been a city council guy, I've been a water board guy, I've been whatever person, right? And they win with a small number of votes and they gain recognition. Scott has something going for him because he served before both on a planning board and on a city council, but less and less of our side bringing balance to the state is getting that opportunity because in these nonpartisan races, let's just say it's 8% of the ballots. That's still a pretty good number of votes that translates down to these local offices that swings an election. And there's other districts where it's fairly common, like Maxine Waters' district, and forget how they do it, where a lot has been wrong. Not to mention the fact what happened in 2020, Kurt, a big event that happens every 10 years under the US Constitution.
Census.
Right.
And the Biden administration wanted to count illegal aliens.
And I'm sure they did. And because of the census, we redraw maps. And when we redraw maps, we reassign voters who they should be voting for. And so who you vote for in the 2022 election, even for assembly or Congress or whatever, may actually be somebody different in 2024 because that map has changed. And you may not notice that. So please ensure wherever you are in the country, use that fabulous tool that's up on the Rebuild California homepage to just do a cursory check of your ballot and make sure that you get the opportunity to, of course, vote Republican, but also to vote for the right office. And we started looking into this a few years ago, Kurt, because some of these offices don't make any sense. Why we have huge number of votes in some areas for the exact same office with the exact same population and tiny number of votes in the others. And when you drill down to the smaller ones, it's not just people not marking, not down ballot. It's actually because we caught them getting the wrong ballot. Now, for everybody out there that wants to raise holy hell, you can't. What? Yes, indeed. You've only got 32 days after the election to challenge an election. 30 working days, about 32 days, and the elections become certified. So, Kurt, you made a really good point. I want to let you jump on here. That's another reason the candidates sometimes need to have a little bit of money in the bank because challenging an election result is really expensive and hard to do and can be delayed just long enough to where we lose it anyway. Kurt, that's back to you.
You know, the problem is that I'm just contemplating what you said about the ballots being wrong. That's their job. It just shows you why we need smaller government. If they can't even get ballots right, we just need a lot fewer people on the government payroll. But that's concerning. But something you said earlier about liberal lawyers trying to get council districts and school districts into individual districts inside the big district. Think about that in Newport Mesa School District, Newport Beach and Costa Mesa, part of Scott's district. There's 7 members of the school board, but you could only vote for one in your area. That means you are completely denied your constitutional right of representation because the people, the 7 people that vote on your school district, its budget, the policies, 6 of them you don't get to vote for. Where is the representative government in that?
Well, there isn't, and it's actually the opposite that they use, right? Because they say, oh, this sector, because it's Asian, Black, old, young, green, is underrepresented because they don't have their own representative. Now, that's kind of a deep subject, right? Because it goes into what you're really voting for is kind of the top 3, etc. But the takeaway I want you to get here is check your ballot before you turn it in. And the reality is, most people don't vote on sides B and C. That's why the voter total is wrong. But a lot of the reasons we think too in these local elections is because you don't see the candidate that's been campaigning for you because they may have the right data and you don't. Kurt, I want to shift gears a little bit here if I could.
Let's talk about some of the problems in California, Mike. You heard this week that California officials, and you might shed some light on this. I believe that Governor Gavin Newsom's wife might have been involved, but the Coastal Commission in California, an unelected body, has said they're not going to let SpaceX have more rocket launches because they don't like Elon Musk's Twitter posts. Do we not have free speech in this country anymore? Does the government get to tell us we don't like your free speech, so you don't get to do X?
It goes deeper than that, in my opinion. And this is the problem that we have. And we'll get to the gas thing here in a second, but it becomes to a deeper problem. So the Climate Commission is picked by an elected official kind of to serve at large. These are not elected offices. So these type of underground politics have taken place since politics has been invented. You know what really scares me, Kurt?
Democrats.
No, actually looking at myself in the mirror. But outside of that,
well, those are 2 things.
Yes. The fact that the commission said it out loud. I want you to really think about that. You'd made a comment on one of the private feeds, Ron. Well, Elon Musk should just move where he launches his rockets from, taking the thousands of jobs from him. It's not that easy. No matter whether you're NASA, SpaceX, or Blue Origin, you could only launch rockets from about 3 sites in the United States, being an old technical guy, for a number of reasons.
Well, so you're kind of... I mean, they launch them in Florida. They used to launch them in Texas.
Florida, Houston, and because you have to have a big space, an ocean nearby in case it crashes, okay? And it's not that easy to build a pad. There's 3 areas we launch rockets from in the United States, okay? You can't just launch a rocket from anywhere. We're not quite to the Star Trek mode yet, okay? They're big, they're messy, and they tend to explode from time to time. And Kurt, I'm definitely against things exploding above my house. Everybody, I realize that's a personal choice, but let me be clear, I'm against things exploding above my house, okay? So it's not that easy to do, and you need to have, it takes a long time to construct them, but let's put that down. There's nothing wrong with that. NASA's one of the few things, Kurt, that the government's done right.
Oh, not recently. Oh, not recently.
Hold on.
They're worried about equity now. They're not worried about getting our astronauts out of space.
In general, what the government did is they built the ecosphere, or the infrastructure, I should say, for launching things into space. Because government had to do that because it cost way more. And then they've turned the launches over to private industry. Got it? Just like the government should build the highways and allow free enterprise to drive on. Fair enough? Okay. They did. That's actually NASA's shrunk. Forget the DEI and the internal workings for a second. So they built 3 major launching pads that they're in effect leasing out to commercial businesses instead of taking taxpayer and letting the companies compete for this business, instead of letting NASA try to launch all the rockets into space on the government's dime. What scares me about Vandenberg and Elon Musk is the Democrats in California are saying out loud they don't agree with Elon's politics, so they're going to use climate as a reason to quell one of the biggest commercial industries for probably the next century, which is going into space. And I want to be really clear on something. Going into space isn't going to Mars or going to the moon. Going into space is how your GPS works, how your cell phone works, how almost every aspect of your everyday life works, because it's our communication satellites and it's a vast array of things that need to go into space. And if California is going to be a major player in that, I'm not quite sure what's left for the state of California. And you know one thing which isn't left for the state of California? It's got to do with gas. Let's talk about gasoline. Go ahead,
It's
Kurt.
going up again because of Democrats in California?
If you read my newsletter or watched the news at all, and again, many of you aren't into it, Gavin Newsom and his own party argued with him on this. And I want to really clear, this is not Democrats, it's extreme left. Just signed a bill to regulate the oil companies. And that's what it could regulate free enterprise. Yes, it'll probably go to court, cause them to do a couple things in the names of theoretically lowering prices. Now, this is how bad it is. And this is really a big takeaway from tonight's show. Katie Hobbs, the Democratic governor of Arizona,
who won by fraud.
Correct, but the Democratic governor, along with the Nevada governor, who's Republican, and both their state senates and state assembly, wrote a letter to Gavin Newsom and said, don't do this. Because we get our oil from the West Coast. So be clear, what we're about to tell you, which just happened this week, is not only going to jack gasoline almost permanently towards a $7 mark in California. And for those of you out there in the desert, well, that's not a problem. I'm just going to drive across over to Yuma because I live in El Centro and get my gas there. Not going to work that way because he's causing gasoline prices to jack up. Kurt, can I take you on this journey?
I'm listening, Mike, and our listeners want to hear this.
The journey is the state legislature proposes about 2,000 ridiculous bills. I can't think of 2,000 things that are wrong with anything, not even with my life, Kurt, and it's not that great. Well, it's okay, but you get my drift, that need to be fixed every year. And they have about 9 months to do that. And by the end of August, they submit these to Gavin Newsom, who has a month to sign them or reject them. Hold that thought. Gavin Newsom then said, well, I'm just mad at the oil companies for some reason. Let's put that down for a second. And he called a special session of the state Senate and state assembly to come in to regulate the oil companies. And by the way, Kurt, you know who ran that special session in the state assembly?
Drum roll.
Hattie Petrie Norris.
Scott's opponent.
Scott's opponent, who knows about as much about oil as I know about knitting and sewing. And if you haven't figured it out, I know nothing about knitting and sewing. And that's how much Hattie Petrie Norris knows about oil. Now, even Mike McGuire, Kurt, the head of the state Senate, said, we don't want to do this. This is insane. This is ridiculous. Gavin said, demand that they do it. He has the right to call a special session, call it an emergency. They passed a bill, two bills, which many, and you can read about them in Netter News and on my X feed, and you can Google them, etc., that are doing two things that are really, really bad. And I want to sum this up. Really, really bad. They're going to ask the oil companies to build underground tanks. Well, that sounds great for the environment. And instead of producing oil on a GIT basis, store a lot of oil, which has been the job of the federal government, and stash it so when there's a gasoline shortage, like it's hard for me to say this with a straight face, they'll release this oil out of these magical tanks and it will drive gas down because apparently Gavin thinks it's that easy as supply and demand. Now, of course, he forgot to mention that during the time they're filling up these tanks, they'll be taking money out of the oil and gasoline supply to fill these tanks. But wait, there's more. And here's the worst part of it, in my opinion. Somebody has to decide how to regulate these oil companies. And Kurt, we've talked about the fast food industry and going to $20 and they want to raise it more, right?
Right. And having a committee
fast food
of elected people that get to decide working conditions.
Most of whom never flipped a burger because they're high-paying jobs, equivalent to the PUC who decides to raise your electric rates, who's never actually worked at the electric company, and they're making $450,000 a year. So now this creates another board, and one of the main complaints, even of some of the Democrats, 11 Democrats in the assembly voted against it and many abstained. It barely passed, which was surprising. It creates a board of people that have about as much experience in the oil business as I do changing my oil. Look at me. Do I look like I changed my oil?
Well, Mike, what's even more frightening about that is you have non-industry people that are going to regulate refineries, things they know nothing about how to operate.
That's exactly my point. It creates another commission that will reverberate long after Gavin has left office. But wait, there's more, Kurt, and we talked about this in the pregame. So while Gavin is yapping away, the gas tax went up in July. What else is about coming soon to a pump near you?
Drum roll again, Mike.
Happen trade increase. What the hell is that? Let me explain something. Under marvelous California law, because they're doing various things, it's a bit complex, that they will be forced, in addition to the road tax that we're paying right now, to add, forget the price of gas fluctuating back and forth, put the economic supply and demand out for a second. They're going to add, yes, you're hearing correctly, 49 or 50 cents a gallon, let's round it up half a cent, in cap and trade tax to every gallon of gas and gasoline in California. How's that sound, Kurt?
So let's make this real for everybody listening here. How much is your gas price going to go up per gallon, Mike, from these Democrat rules?
It's going to go up a minimum of 50 cents a gallon. That doesn't matter what Gavin's new law does or doesn't do, because they're going to add to it. So within that and the road increase, which you're thinking of looking at more because people are driving less, they don't have jobs, you're looking at a minimum of probably about $2.25 a gallon in just taxes.
Extra, so above what we're paying today.
Above what we're paying. So
right, Mike, let's put that in context. This morning on Fox Business, they said the average price per gallon in California was $4.67 per gallon. If you add $2.25, you're looking at almost $7 a gallon.
Correct. And we're talking about, you're already paying about $1.75.
So I want to know who in California knows about this.
Well, here's the problem.
Just the people listening to this program.
And the problem is now what Gavin is doing, which is going to accelerate it even higher. And I'm careful when I do these segments, because I'm not as smart as you, Kurt, but I know a lot about economics, is life is by comparison, right? We compare things. We look at the national gas average and we say, okay, we're $2 higher because of supply and demand. We're $2 higher than the national average. We're $2.10 higher than Arizona, which is kind of a baseline. Fair enough?
Wow.
Okay, now, wait, there's more. with the taking gasoline out of the supply, and I really haven't even gotten to the punchline yet. It is going to take gasoline out of the supply for all the Western states, meaning that this is why the governor of Arizona, a crooked Democrat, but a Democrat all the same.
Isn't that a redundant phrase in today's world, Mike?
Yeah, sometimes, but I thought I'd throw it in because we got time. And the governor and the legislature and governor of both states said, don't do this because it will drive the baseline up. You know, one thing the Western states don't have that Texas and the Eastern states do have when it comes to oil, Kurt? You
They
know
have
the
it in the
answer.
ground.
But they also, well, we have it in the ground too, but we choose
they
not to tap it.
they won't let us get it, but yeah, that's true.
But we don't have a pipeline. There is, you know this, there is no pipeline that comes through the Rocky Mountains. And I want to really stress this as these things constrict oil, which affects natural gas, which affects energy, which affects every aspect of your life, just like those missiles, they can't go higher. There's no pipeline. So when you hear about the Alaskan pipeline, it don't come to California or the Western states. It goes into the flyover states and goes down into other states. When Texas pumps oil, it does not come into California. 66% of our oil, by the way, comes from South America and other countries. Okay? And that 66% is for the Western states, because California, newsflash, we have the most geography and we should be pumping the most oil, but we're not. And now
we have the largest population and the most cars.
But in addition to that, we are going to affect every single Western state, driving the baseline up. So there's a huge, so when you talk out there about, I might vote for Harris because I'm all for joy, understand these are the kinds of policies which are going to drive up your everyday living.
Well, even worse, Kamala Harris said this week that she wouldn't change a thing from the Biden years. She would not change a thing. So let's look at the inflation in gas prices just the last 4 years that Harris has caused. About 50%. It was double at one point. The grocery prices, they lie to us. They say, oh, it's only a 20% inflation. No. The things I buy, steaks, 50% higher. Chicken, 50% higher. Crackers, 50 to 100% higher. No, food inflation is way more than 20%. Why? But let's talk about why. Because when energy prices go up, food is delivered on trucks on a just-in-time inventory system to grocery stores. If gas prices go up, the cost of delivering everything to the consumer and businesses goes up.
Kurt, you want to have some fun? And I think you know this for anybody out there. The press has a really bad habit of saying, well, it's ranting and raving. And I want to get to the crime rate statistics that were released today. But for everybody out there, our job at Rebuild California and on the show, California Free Radio, is to equip you with tools. Because I see a lot of people think they're arguing over hyperbole, right? Look, I think Harris is a cackling idiot. That's kind of a matter of my opinion. I get it. Can I throw in?
You can make a factual argument about that, Mike.
You can, but we could talk a long time about that. But let's throw in facts I want you to get tonight. Check your ballot. That's a fact. You can check it. But also, if you want to check inflation, Kurt, you know what the CPI index is?
Yeah, I know what it is. Consumer Price Index.
Right. You want to have some fun? Look at Google. Anybody can do this. CPI index. And you will actually get, provided by the government, you can plug in any month of any year and see what inflation is. And it's interesting, when you plug in from the time Trump left office and Biden came in, last I checked, it was 21, 22%. You can plug in any month in any year. I forget exactly what it's called right now, but you'll see it come up. It's the CPI index. And you can even do it by some industry groups. And by the way, you can plug in again months, you can plug in commodities. I used to live in this space. This is publicly available information. So while liberals like to argue over protecting democracy and hyperbole about fluffy things, let's hit with some facts. You're correct. Under Biden, it's shot up tremendously. There's just overall, no doubt about it. You can plug in the CPI index, see the chart, plug and reset it. You can check your ballot. Two important takeaways that you have.
You mentioned Harris earlier, and that's an excellent point about inflation. This election is going to be about the economy, border, and crime. And one of the things Harris claims is she prosecuted criminals. But, Mark Levin is a radio guy. He's got a show on Fox, and he has talked to people that work with Harris in San Francisco and in the Attorney General's office in California, and has some frightening things to say. He said that some of the people who worked in her offices did all the courtroom work. Harris never went to court, never prosecuted anybody because she was too incompetent to do it. Interns in Harris's agency were not allowed to look Harris in the eye. Remember that story about Hillary Clinton and the White House?
Hold on. If I look with Hillary Clinton, I wouldn't want to look at her either.
I get that. You need a bag over your head and hers too.
Right.
But all employees at the Attorney General's office had to call her General Harris. Have you ever heard of an Attorney General thinking that they're a field general like in the Army and having to be called General Harris? This woman is a nut. 90% of her staff as vice president has left because she's an incorrigible, obnoxious person just like Hillary Clinton.
And I understand, but I want to go back to some interesting facts today, okay? And she is certainly, I wouldn't want to be there. So I want to go to something that the mainstream press doesn't like to report on. Kurt, do you remember a few months ago?
I remember a few years ago. What about a few months ago?
Well, that was my punchline. Okay. A few months ago, the jobs report came out. Remember? And they're like, jobs.
Oh, they always revise them down because they're lying.
Then they revised them down. Yeah. The press had a report on that one. Let's now go there. Well, an interesting report came out today that actually was not in the mainstream press. This goes back to Kamala Harris. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, and there's lots involved in a crime report. Oh, hear me out here. California tends not to report to the national database. It's skewed. I get it. But the Federal Bureau of Investigation quietly updated its 2022 crime data. This is on my Twitter feed. I'm going to re-exit right now to show an increase in violent crimes despite previous data showing violent crimes have fallen the past year.
Now, why the revision? Why the revision?
Because data is reported wrong. Forget why. This is the FBI reporting. Let's forget the reasons why it is. What it really shows is under Biden, Harris, and the Democrats, especially in California, crime has gone up. Now, Kurt, I'm sure you saw the headlines on that.
It depends on where you look. If you were watching MSNBC, you wouldn't see it. If you're on the Netter News or at Netter Mike on Twitter, you will see it.
As I ended this tweet with, forget that for a second, the FBI originally said there's a 2.1% decrease in violent crime, not counting property crime and everything they admitted was up. Now they're like, oh, we're sorry. It actually was an increase. We missed 1,000 murders. Okay, which is kind of weird. So I just retweeted that, and you'll see that in a lot of places. So your government's lying to you, which leads me in these last 10 minutes of the show to incredibly important things I want to talk about on the ballot. Crime is up. And this is hard to believe but for a lot of folks, but Californians, everyone out there, in spite of Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom spouting off about this, that, and the other, people see for themselves that crime is up. Proposition 47, we know that passed, and forget why it passed. It passed because of a low voter turnout. I wrote an article on that not too long ago.
Now, Mike, what's Prop 47, just to remind our audience?
Prop 47 was the one that basically said, if you do something really bad, we'll give you maybe a traffic ticket. That needs to be reversed.
And there's a chance to do so on this ballot here this fall.
You have the chance to undo it.
And what is that? Prop 36,
Prop
right?
36. There is nothing, there are only one other proposition on the ballot that I think is as important, but we have to pass 36. 70% of the public is in favor of doing that. Because in spite of statistics and hyperbole and things in the mainstream press, which 6 people watch a night, we have to get this passed. And for everyone out there, no matter who's on your ballot or what they are, tell them you support 36.
And Mike, what presidential candidate supported Prop 47 back in the day when it passed? Do you remember?
Well, that was Kamala Harris, and I get it. But today, and that Kamala Harris, we know the whole story. The logic says Kamala Harris, and you're right, and the Democrats have got us into this hole. And across the board, when I say the Democrats, I don't mean every Democrat that's out there. Okay, so this isn't the Hatfields versus the McCoys. It's the general California against a small group of people who have seized power and manipulated us into crime in our street and too high taxes. So on all your ballots in California, regardless of what school district you're in, where you live, who you think should be on your ballot, Prop 36 is on your ballot and you need to vote yes. And no matter how you look at statistics, you need to vote yes. Did you hear what happened on Prop 36 just the other day? The 7-Elevens got together because I guess you're getting tired of these smash and grab loots that take place. And $2 million was donated, $1 million by the corporate 7-Eleven and $1 million by small 7-Eleven owners who go like, we've had it. Okay. We're all pitching in like $2,000 a piece to support Prop 36. And if you want to know like 1,200
people are fed up with the crime in this country and in this state.
You want to know how it affects your everyday life? Every time you go into a Walgreens, a Vons, and you say, why the hell is shampoo and razor blades locked up? Vote yes on 36.
That's another reason. And another reason there's inflation. And now it's entire soap products. There's entire aisles. There's a Ralph's Market in Lake Forest, California, in South Orange County.
Yeah.
Where if you go in there, you've got to buy your soap and your other products in a separate checkout at the end of that aisle that's all glassed in. So you have to check out twice to shop at that Ralph's in Lake Forest on El Toro Road.
You know, Kurt, I'll be honest with you. When I was a young man and they used to see me come into a 7-Eleven, they just locked the entire store. But I probably shouldn't mention it on here.
Well, Mike, you shouldn't have been brandishing like Elmer Fudd or Yosemite Sam when you went in.
I didn't know it was illegal at the time, and it probably wasn't.
Well, if you go to Arizona, open carry's fine. Texas, open carry's fine.
So yes on 36, vote Republican, check your ballot. But something else they're sneaking in.
And vote early.
There's been a third rail, as they call it in California politics, which even the radical Democrats are afraid to touch. And vote no on all the bonds. And that's been Prop 13. And the famous Prop 13, you know, as the proposition that protects you on property tax, right, Kurt?
And the original Prop 13 required a 2/3 vote to raise taxes. And now the Democrats have been chipping away at it a little at a time.
Oh, they're more than chipping away now, brother. They've taken out a bulldozer and a sledgehammer with Prop 5. Prop 5 is going to take the backbone out of part of Prop 13 by allowing municipalities to pass tax increases with a 55% majority. Now, I want you to link a couple things together that I'm talking about tonight. Vote no on 5. It is going to literally, not only we are going to be separately paying more at the pump, but your local state sales tax and your property tax is a surcharge. It will go up, and they just have to convince half the people who vote and 3/4 of them don't vote anyway. But I want you to really think about something when I told you to check your ballot. I get it. I'm one of those. I'm an old expletive deleted, been around a while. I did my civic duty. I did from time to time, and until the recall came along with Orrin and Dan and the rest of our crew, wasn't involved a lot in politics, paid some attention to it. Democrats have counted on that. They spent the last 20, 30 years in California building institutions. Kurt, the beginning I talked about checking your ballot, and you're like, okay. Understand that by getting the liberal lawyers to sue these cities into smaller fragmented elections, by then scrambling up where you could drop your ballot off anywhere, by then, I'll call it unconsciously, because sometimes it is. No one brilliant goes to work for the Board of Registers. People get the wrong ballot. They start to fill, and they've done this, the institution of the coffers of our local elected officials with liberal Democrats. They've been working on that for 20 years. And you look around and you go, well, it's my city council. Oh, it's got 2 out of 5 Democrats, 3 out of 5 Democrats, 4 out of 5 liberals, 5 radicals. What the hell, right? Because I have been paying attention. And they only have so much power because generally in California on the bond issues and other things, the proverbial New York finger is always given by the majority on spending more money much of the time. Now they want to change it though. So now the city council, and pick your city where you may be getting the wrong ballot, is filled with radicals that want to take your tax money. Now we're going to be able to put things on the ballot and get them passed with barely a majority versus 2/3. And the very people proposing it are the people that you haven't been paying attention to, where they've been building institutions in your local government from the ground up for about 20 to 30 years. Scott Peotter in the state assembly is important. The local elections are important. And Kurt, we talk about Harris and Trump, and that gets a lot of pub, and I'm a Trump guy, and you're a Trump guy. Dan, our producer's a Trump guy.
But Mike, how could anyone vote for that mental midget, Kamala Harris? I mean, really?
Here's the story. We have an electoral college when it comes to that. Here's the interesting part. 6.5 million people, you've heard me say this last time, and this time it's going to be more, have voted for Donald Trump beyond the share of Republicans in California. They came out to vote, but many of them, in addition to voting for Donald Trump last election, we still may lose California Electoral College, voted for other Democrats down ballot, may have not paid attention to those propositions. Anybody who votes for Harris, in my opinion, probably is not taking a good look at the election. But in California, check your ballot. In California, no on 5 is going to be so critically important to your pocketbook. They're going to continue to carve from the top, and now they're carving from the bottom. And stopping crime with Prop 36 is going to be also critically important, because the more they steal, the more your costs go up. and the bigger government gets. Go ahead, Kurt, as we wind down at the end here.
So I'd like everybody to go to Mike's Twitter feed at NetterMike. I'd like everybody to sign up for the Netter News. I want everybody to go to taxfighter.com. Look at Scott Peotter's website. Make a donation. Political campaigns cost money. Mike talked earlier about appeals. You can send electronic messages very inexpensively now to voters in the district. Vote early, so you're off the voting list, so the conservative groups can target their money and their volunteer efforts toward getting people to vote who aren't necessarily going to vote. We need to bring in more voters. In Scott's district, Irvine, Tustin, Costa Mesa, only 40% of the voters are registered Democrats. This is a winnable district. The rest are split between no party preference and Republican. It's a winnable race. It's important for not just your family's future, but for California's future, that we take over more seats in the state legislature. Vote yes on Prop 36, vote no on Prop 5. And it's very, very important that not only you vote, but you get your friends and family who think like you to vote too. That's what the Democrats and the unions have been doing. They've been harvesting ballots. There's an enormous effort by churches and Republican groups to harvest ballots to fight that. Be part of that effort.
And if you have any questions, we have a voter guide up for LA on rebuildcalifornia.com. Pay attention to your local measures. Here's the thing, California. Pay attention. Vote 100% of the ballot. Educate yourself. Make sure that what you do, what you have to do to stand ground politically. Whoever out there, if you're bothering to vote for president and you're voting for Donald Trump, even many voting for Harris are going to vote yes on 36. Start voting for change. Look around your streets. How's it working out? We're covered with homelessness. And when you see the homeless and you're getting gas, as homeless are literally on a gas station, paying close to $6 a gallon, how do you feel about that?
Well, Mike, as our viewers and listeners know, I grew up in Los Angeles. When we go to the KABC studios, I'm having to dodge homeless people that are wandering against red lights in the intersections. It's not the Los Angeles that I grew up in. Not at all.
It's the state anywhere is not the state that we grew up in, but it's still a beautiful state. And I get a lot of you can go to Outrage, you can email me directly if you want information on local ballot measures. We'll point you to the right place. They're going to be on my X feed. Scott's putting a lot up on his website. But here's the thing. Start by standing your ground politically. Start by paying attention. I anoint each one of you out there right now a disciple of the movement for change. Spread this show. Spread our websites. We have 20 days left. Vote early, just friggin' vote and vote the entire ballot. But you have to understand if right now you are taking 60 minutes out of your life, God bless you, to watch this show. There's a lot of people that have no clue what's going on. And that, especially in California Free Radio, is what we're talking about. It's up to you to take your state back. The action you could take is vote. And in addition, yes, you could contribute, but also spread the word. If you're watching this on social media, push it out. You have to let people know that we will stand ground and we will not allow people to take the California with our beautiful weather, mountains, ocean, the state that we grew up in, from us for the purposes of just destroying the nationwide economy in the name of liberalism. It's not going to happen on our watch. Thank you, my friends. We will see you on California Free Radio next week.
Thank you, everybody.